Good morning. The meeting of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority Board of Directors is now called to order at 11:11. Please call the roll.
Director Kenneth?
Here.
Director Flaher?
Here.
Director Chapman? Not present. Director Annable? Present. Director Alexander?
Here.
Director Potter?
Here.
Director Gill? Not present.
Thank you. At this time, any members of the public will have an opportunity to address the board on any item not on the agenda. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. Am I turning it over to one of you?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager. Just want to let everyone know what the run of show will be today. We've got some opening remarks. We've got 3 departments presenting, and then we'll break for lunch. We anticipate that'll be right around the noon hour, maybe a little before. We'll take maybe 10-15 minutes. We can make that decision at that time. And then we'll resume with 3 more department updates and closing remarks from our General Manager.
Thank you.
Lee, do you want to just talk through the process? You know, what are we doing here today? And obviously coming back to the board with the work plan and budget. And so in terms of any action that we need to take today.
Sure, and actually, I'm going to look to Justina to make sure that if you were going to make any opening remarks as well. Not today. Very good. Okay, so this morning, it's odd not to say evening. This morning, you'll be hearing from the leadership team. Our challenges upcoming, our themes and priorities for the upcoming year, what we'll be working on as we draft our work plan for fiscal year 23-24. This will all be about the work and not the numbers. And in May, we'll be bringing the budget associated with the projects that we'll be talking about today and even the projects you don't see on the work plan to the ABC May 8th. May 11, I'm looking to Justina, sorry. And then to the board, you'll get the full work plan and budget, and that's May 8th, right? June. Sorry, June, yes. That's what happens when I don't have notes. So ABC for the budget in May, and then the full budget work plan to the full board in June for hopefully approval, and then implemented in July. Are there any questions I can answer about the general process? Okay, thank you.
Okay, good morning, board members, and thank you for joining staff for this fiscal year 23-24 work plan workshop. In a moment, you'll be hearing from the leadership team as they present their priorities for the coming year that advance. Hold on a second, Justine, not there yet. Key themes of our work. And following that, we'll be seeking the board's input. To start us off, I'd like to provide a few high-level remarks about the key themes that are foundational to informing the agency's work plan, priorities, and recommendations you'll be hearing about in a moment. Okay, Justina. So the key themes are resiliency, organizational resiliency, people and nature, and agricultural sustainability. And I'm going to just touch on each of these. So we'll start with the first one. By resiliency, we're talking about climate, biodiversity, and community, all aspects of resiliency in the work we do. So that can include nature-based solutions to climate change. It can include, just getting started. It can include resiliency actions really for the next 100 years in the realm of water, wildfire, climate, ecological resiliency. It includes wildlife connectivity. And it includes actions that center nature as infrastructure, essential infrastructure to our communities. The next one is organizational resiliency. And by this, I mean long-term financial sustainability of the Open Space Authority. And let me say a little bit more about that. As you know, we're actively now evaluating new opportunities and finance mechanisms to enhance our ongoing revenues for operations and maintenance, stewardship and restoration of our lands and natural resources, opening more lands to the public, and providing greater opportunities to connect people with nature. And we're continuing to leverage our District 1, Measure Q, and Measure T dollars to attract significant local, state, federal, and private dollars, as has been our awesome track record, thanks to the leadership of Megan Draper and her team. We are continuing to enhance our operational excellence systems, business practices, and procedures that will improve efficiency and effectiveness across the agency. And as you know, we're invested in succession planning to cultivate, empower, and prepare the next generation of leaders at the Open Space Authority, both at the staff level and at board and CAC levels, to continue our critically important mission in the Santa Clara Valley. And we're increasing our sustainability of our operations and facilities to reduce our agency's carbon footprint. Next, people and nature, or nature and people, really interchangeable. We start with nature. What we mean by that as a key theme is we're designing our preserve facilities with nature in mind. Designing public access facilities that are compatible with and emphasize the unique natural resources and sensitive plant and animal species of the landscapes that we're planning within. When we talk about people, we're connecting the next generation or new generation of visitors to nature through public access and through nature-based experiences and programs. And we're doing this in a way that's welcoming, inclusive, and support the demographics of our region and provide equitable and inclusive connections to nature. And then fourth is agricultural sustainability. We are, as we speak, defining OSA's unique role in the protection and sustainability of agriculture in the Santa Clara Valley. And as you know, we've been talking about this for many, many years, both at the board level, at the CAC level. But we are actively integrating that into our departmental work and our staffing work, and you'll hear more about this later. We're creating a dedicated agricultural program with the agency where we'll be catalyzing actions to activate climate smart, regenerative agriculture and enhance food systems and food security in the Santa Clara Valley. And with that, just as kind of framing, I think we're ready to dive into the priorities department by department.
All right, thank you. And thank you, members of the board. Mark Landgraf, External Affairs Manager and responsible for the Public Affairs Department. So this morning I'll be talking a little bit about what we're planning to do in the coming year that are relevant to the themes that our General Manager just described. I think you're all familiar with what Public Affairs does, but just as a quick refresh, we're responsible for all of the communications of the agency, all of the media engagement, strategic partnerships, funding, and policy work on behalf of the Open Space Authority. And so through these responsibilities, we support everything else at the agency as well, across all of the different departments. And so one of the big initiatives this year is, of course, celebrating our 30th anniversary. And that's being primarily led through our Public Information Officer, Charlotte Graham, and her team, Anne Marie and Katie, and this year, including our Public Affairs intern, Adeline. And so through that celebration of our 30th year, we're taking that opportunity to expand our public audience so that more are aware of us and that more are aware of the important climate, health, and other benefits that we provide through protection and restoration of nature, and through connecting people to nature and how members of the public can engage with us. A great example of how we do this is the Mercury News article that appeared on February 19th about our 30th anniversary and had a lot of those messages embedded in it. It doesn't hurt that we're blessed this year with a lot of attention grabbing threes. We're turning 30 while protecting 30,000 acres, growing trails to 33 miles, 13 million in funding through our urban grant programs, and tend to and have really had a good record of 3 times leverage for every dollar of funding that we spend from our own revenues. We leverage that 3 times over from outside sources. So that gives us a lot of cool talking points as we go through our media and other messaging. We're going to continue to reach out to the media and promote our events and accomplishments throughout the year. We've already received 19 media hits this year, as opposed to about 2 this time last year. So a huge increase in media attention with what we're doing. And we are increasingly transcreating culturally relevant content for ethnic media in languages other than English. A little bit more about that in a moment. As we educate the public, we're increasingly doing this through storytelling as a very effective way to connect with people about the importance of nature and what it means to them and their families. Events and activities such as those at Freckles Hill Earth Day, Bay Area Ridge Trail dedication, Spina Farms in the fall with their pumpkin patch, the grand opening this fall of Mayana Yakima Coyote Ridge that you're going to hear more about shortly as well. All of those events and activities are going to be promoted through this 30th anniversary year. And we'll also be developing a public interactive 30 years in review story map, similar to what was done for the 5-year anniversary of Measure Q, but more elaborate, more interactive, and will also include the 10 years of conservation leadership since the Valley Green print publication. Please. So language accessibility is an important focus for us currently and increasingly in the coming year. We do translations of signage, ethnic media, videos, social media videos that are not only posted on our social media channels, but then also promoted through ethnic media. All of those are translated into languages other than English. Primarily those are Spanish and Vietnamese, but at some points also to Chinese language. And we're also translating our year in review, and we'll be providing an on-demand telephone assisted translation service for staff to use with visitors when those are needed. As mentioned earlier, we are also working with consultants and where we can with partners to increasingly transcreate content. So translation tends to be direct translation of something that's originally written in English, whereas transcreation is really creating original content in those other languages in a more culturally relevant way to begin with. And that's something that our consultants are and also partners who are natives to those other languages are helping us with. It's a more effective way of communicating in the long run, and we're trying to work that into all of the translated content that we're putting out. Also, interpretive signage is increasingly language independent so that it uses imagery and graphics to a greater degree than in the past. And working closely with the creative genius of Terry Broadway, our education programs administrator, to put that in place. Thank you. How do you know that ahead of time? Oh, you're looking at my notes. Thank you. So, of course, community engagement is another important aspect of public affairs work. Lena Ayan is leading the community engagement effort for the Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Planning. That is underway, starting with listening sessions, that's then transitioning to focus groups, and then also larger community workshops. Of course, in partnership with Nick Perry, the project manager, and a host of consultants that are helping with that effort. It's important to note that the relationships that are built through that community engagement, both with members of the public, but also with community-based organizations, are for agency-wide benefit over the long term. They will far outlast our work on the master planning so that they benefit our agency and ultimately the public over time. Next slide. See, I'm not sticking to my notes now, so you can. So for legislative affairs, of course, funding is a primary effort that we engage in locally, regionally, at the state, and increasingly at the federal level to help establish a pipeline of funding, working closely with Megan Drager and her team to coordinate on the pipeline of funding at those different levels that then gets translated into grants that support the important work that we do, from anything from acquisition to restoration projects, enhancement of natural resources, but also public access and education programs. So we're also working closely with partners, again, cross-sector, to inform efforts that seek to reach other state climate, transportation, housing, and other goals in hopes of avoiding unintended consequences that could negatively affect the public and private investments in conservation in our jurisdiction. That is primarily through the policy realm. We, of course, also support policy that is important to our conservation efforts and removes barriers to our work. So that concludes my summary of public affairs. And with that, then hand it to Matt.
Good morning, directors. Matt Friedman, Assistant General Manager over Land Conservation and Planning. Just a little bit more about Run of Show. We thought between each presentation, we pause in case there were questions. So if anyone has questions for Mark Landgraf, this would be the opportune moment. And there will be time at the end of all the presentations for more questions and much larger discussion, but we thought we would give the opportunity.
Great. Is there any question? Full speed.
Okay, all right. Well, morning in advance. I'm already going off script. So Mark mentioned threes. I think in our department, we think about it 30. So what we're up to is 30 by 30 by 30 by 30, right? So we're working really hard this year to implement the 30 by 30 state and federal goals. And during our 30th anniversary year, we aspire to hit 30,000 acres. 30 by 30 by 30 by 30. It rolls off the tongue. So what my department does, the Conservation Initiatives and Grants Management Department, we're responsible for much of the work that implements the agency's mission to conserve the environment through direct preservation of open spaces, natural areas, and working farms and ranches. And this work is led by Linda Kwong, Real Property Program Manager, Megan Drager, our Grants Program Manager, with awesome support from Jackie Latham and Isabella Chrisman. I think the whole department is here now. And guided in part by the Santa Clara Valley Green Print, the lands that we conserve encompass our most biodiverse landscapes. They accommodate landscape linkages for wildlife and people. They establish climate resilient green belts that direct development projects at proven infill locations that prevent greenhouse gas emissions through vehicle miles traveled. So the team works very closely with other departments, including public affairs, as Mark described, planning, and natural resources, to protect natural and working lands, not just through direct land preservation, but through other policy tools, including land use and general plan amendments, by fostering conservation partnerships with other agencies and organizations to help them do better and align our work collectively. And we also spend a lot of time reviewing and commenting on egregious development proposals to have them avoid important areas and mitigate to the maximum extent. So that's an overview of the department. And next slide, please. So I'll start with our grants program, and I'll just share that much of the grants work doesn't show up directly in the work plan. You won't see this on the list of work plan projects. It's almost entirely programmatic. This is all kind of behind the scenes, so to speak. But we can kind of boil it down to really two elements of the program. We bring in money to fund our work and we disperse it to our partners to fund their compelling open space work. So in terms of bringing money in and securing funding to implement our mission, we spend a lot of time applying for grants, right? So an important part of organizational financial sustainability is having the funding to do our projects. And you'll notice that many years our budgets actually far exceed our revenue, right? Because we're bringing in so much partner funding, especially to pay for really, really expensive land deals. In service of this, currently some work that's underway. The team's managing over a dozen grants totaling around $25 million. In addition, we were awarded a little over $1 million from the Sustainable Ag Land Conservation Programs for the U property. We secured a little over $500,000 from the Department of Water Resources for CD Camp. And while not official yet, we just learned we were recommended for funding for nearly $2 million to support CD Camp from the State Coastal Conservancy. So I'm bringing this up because these are complex grant projects. They can take quite a while to actually execute the grant agreement, negotiate all of the final terms and details. So a lot of this work is going to carry on into fiscal year 23-24. And other priorities for that fiscal year, again, completing these grant agreements, and in particular, the grant agreements that are necessary to pay for the transfer of those properties in Tiny Valley to the Open Space Authority. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. Some of the other work around bringing the grant funding in, again, as Mark described, it's really all about developing long-term funding strategies. There's really a long lag time between applications and actually receiving the funds. So the team plans ahead, typically by a year or more, kind of anticipate what grant funding could be available to strategically match that to the opportunities we have. And that's whether that could be acquisition or development of capital or natural resource projects. So a lot of strategy going on. And then some service of that, Megan in particular works really closely with Mark and his team to as well as our lobbyists at QPG to inform grant guidelines that are underway so we can have them capture the type and amount of funding that we need to pay for our work. And so the strategic planning and then the tactical application for grant programs and a large part is really all about relationship building, and just huge kudos to Megan Dreger for the relationship she's cultivated with so many public agencies who have now developed this real amount of trust based on our track record to deliver projects and essentially to do what we say we're going to do as a really accountable grant recipient. So relationship building is really key, and so many meetings and tours and conversations happen kind of behind the scenes for every one of these boards. We've been so happy to announce past year. And then shifting to providing grant funding to local communities. We have two major programs that accomplish this. The first is the 20% grant program. Since 1999, the authority has funded 21 projects for a total just over 9 million. And we just recently received our first new 20% application in several years, right? This was for the Alive Park in San Jose. It just went to the Citizens Advisory Committee earlier this week. They will be forwarding a recommendation, which will be coming to the board, I believe, in April. And our other major grant program is the Urban Grant Program, connecting people to nature close to where they live, work, and play, in cities and the urban unincorporated pockets. And there, since 2016, we've awarded 56 grants for just under about $4 million. And as you know, this awards everything: trail building, creating community gardens, and funding environmental programs. So 23-24 sees a continuation of that, with another biannual solicitation is underway. There's $1.5 million available this round, 750,000 available for programs, and 750,000 available for capital and planning awards. The programs come to the board in May, and the capital and planning awards will come out in July, especially. So carrying on in the next fiscal year. And then this work entails so much, again, behind the scenes management and administration. I think Jackie shared with me that there are maybe 12 urban grants that are underway right now that she's tracking. And again, the team is gearing up for our next fiscal year. With that, I'll shift to the real property program. And yeah, and sort of some of the themes Coyote Valley addresses, I believe, all of them. And really the permanent protection of our Coyote Valley properties will be the major emphasis in fiscal year 23-24. And so that's, again, transferring the properties from Coast to Open Space Authority as the long-term owner and manager of these properties. So we're on track to securing over 33 million in funding, and that will transfer 850 acres from Coast in 3 phases from big state funders, the California Natural Resources Agency, state parks, and the Wildlife Conservation Board. Having site control over these properties in Coyote Valley is necessary to implement the Coyote Valley landscape vision to achieve all of the goals of the CB camp, right? So connecting over 1 million acres between the Santa Cruz and Diablo Range Mountains, restoring the Fisher Creek floodplain, really valuable riparian and wetland habitats, and connecting people to nature in what will become a truly novel open space reserve in this area. Agriculture will be a big theme next fiscal year. We aim to close on the new property conservation easement, 79 acres adjacent to the Frontoyo Grove conservation easement we hold in San Martin. This is going to remove the ability for the landowner to subdivide the property into 14 units, and it helps establish a pretty important agricultural preserve in San Martin. And we're continuing to work with the county to implement the MOU we have in place with the county, where we're using their funding in part to secure additional conservation easements on at-risk farmland. We hope to bring an extension of that MOU to your board and before June. So stay tuned there. Again, really, really exciting partnership. I think I'll save that for that board meeting unless there are questions about that. All right. Accelerating conservation through partnerships. Again, we don't do this work alone. Some other really important initiatives that are will be wrapping up hopefully in fiscal year 23-24 include transfer of the Tilton Ranch property to the Open Space Authority with the Habitat Agency holding an easement, which enabled them to enroll that in the reserve system. Really, really complicated project that's involved field operations, planning, natural resources to develop the terms of that conservation easement, how we can restore habitat while also accommodating really important public recreation on the property. So it's a pretty big deal. It'll be really exciting to bring that to you. We are also aiming to transfer the Nature Conservancy's Pajaro Ranch property and the Pajaro watershed into the Space Authority, and that's adjacent to the old Salachi conservation easement that I think somebody had handed in years ago. So again, establishing kind of a multi-benefit agricultural floodplain preserve in that area. And we are setting aside funds to support the Vine Roots Trail as well. And kind of wrapping up on the real property program, some of the additional work, stewarding our conservation easements. Right now, we hold 15 conservation easements over private property, totals about 5,146 acres. This is also very, very much about relationship building with the landowners to ensure that they are aware of the conservation values on their property, that they understand and annually are reminded, of the restrictions the easement puts in place. And Linda and Isabella are phenomenal ambassadors with our landowners. Again, making sure they understand that and ensuring those properties are well stewarded. All right, and then next slide, please. Some other conservation planning initiatives, and I think these are really more interdepartmental in nature. This has a lot to do with special projects and partnerships to kind of advance the pace and scale of conservation outside of direct land preservation or conservation easements. So the first example on this list is the Climate Smart San Jose National Working Lands element. We actually hope that we'll be able to wrap this project up with City Council approval of that element as early as May. But next fiscal year, we hope to partner with the city to look for pilot projects where we can actually implement some natural and working lands projects that might touch down through some urban forestry opportunities. There's a new urban forester that the city hired. But really, this kind of project is just more representative of some of the partnerships that we work on to inspire the protection of natural and working lands through implementations like nature-based strategies, right? Really beating that drum and aligning our partners to focus their efforts in some of the most important places. A similar program is the Climate Resilience Credit Program. We're evaluating the feasibility in partnership with Post and its consultants of developing a pilot environmental credits program that would create a new funding stream to pay for land conservation and restoration, with Coyote Valley being the pilot landscape. A little bit more to talk about there. And then as well, strategic conservation plan. So where does the Open Space Authority invest its precious limited funding? How do we align our partners work? Focus it all on the most important places, right, that have the highest return on investment, protecting biodiverse places, the remaining opportunities for landscape connectivity, protecting farmlands, places where you close gaps in the Barrier Ridge Trail, right? And you look at all of these for conservation values. So next fiscal year, the team will be reevaluating some of our priorities and some of our strategies. And that'll entail a number of meetings with other partners to make sure we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. One thing, just to tee it up a little bit, I'll share, there's quite a lot of work that's already happening in the Pottero watershed. I think a lot of you are aware of the flooding. There's a lot of interest in maybe duplicating some of the successes we've had in Coyote Valley and the Pottero. Can we preserve the floodplain and have those floodplain agricultural lands remain working lands? And can we restore connectivity along the Pottero River between the Gavilan Range, the San Andreas Mountains, and the Diablo Range? So in some ways, it's a little bit of a mirror image of Coyote Valley. It might take a few years to kind of tee up a coordinated conservation strategy, but it's one of the landscapes that's already emerging as a possible priority in that acquisition market. And then I promise I'm wrapping up now. Something else we do is we review development threats and proposed land use changes. And so again, in partnership planning, natural resources, legislative affairs, we spend a lot of time reviewing development plans and proposals. And there are a couple of really big ones that are underway in Coyote Valley that you will be hearing a lot more about in the next few weeks and months. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now. And happy to take questions and maybe look forward to more discussion this afternoon.
Alex?
So the question I still get asked is how many acres? I don't know what to say. And what do we have going? And you outlined what we have going. So what does that translate to in acreage? What we're 30,000 now?
Yeah.
What's it gonna be after all of you just what described?
So not to put the team on the spot, we can give you the precise acreage and have that exact stat after lunch if you can wait. Otherwise, I'll say we're on track to approximately 30,000 acres in our 30th anniversary year. But if you'd be interested in more specific breakdown on the lands we own and manage and fee versus what the conservation easements, we can get that to you.
Yeah, I think it would be good. It's the question is constantly asked.
Yeah, I know. I totally understand.
Load my lips.
One thing I think is pretty straightforward to look at, and that talked about the lands we've acquired with our partners that are held by other partners that are coming our way. And there are at least 5,000 acres coming at us in the next year or two at the most. That's not even counting the additional land that the Habitat Agency has acquired up on top of Coyote Ridge that will be coming our way as well. So we can be looking at anywhere between 5,000 and 7,500 acres coming at us in the next couple of years. So that's a big increase in the responsibilities for land management.
Makes us more of a business organization than an acquisition. For us. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I like to hear. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, we'll have a staff briefing on it.
Anyone else? One quick question, it's probably just quick. So conservation easements apply to 20% grant programs as well.
That's right.
So this potential proposal that's coming to the board in April would have a conservation easement on it.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a 0.33 acre property, but it would be subject to the terms of the conservation easement.
Okay.
That might not itself get us over 30,000 acres, but every little bit.
I don't think that one,
It's resonant with Mark's theme of threes though, right? So.
Oh my gosh. No, and I'm really interested in the pilot project that you're talking about teeing off of Climate Smart, because I think that's important, because anytime with measurable outcomes that we can show, what the objective is, and I know how hard it was to try to get natural working lands into Climate Smart. So again, a measurable outcome is good to show right off the bat. So something that's really visible. So tree plantings, come to mind.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, sometimes I think the city might not appreciate what an opportunity they have in the natural and working lands element. And so a real opportunity for us to continue kind of encouraging and pushing and helping them identify, pilot projects, so they can kind of get credit for their own really thoughtful, work in this area.
I love the way you think, that implied, look.
Exactly right. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure. This is really exciting and it's clearly a substantial focus of the organization is going into planning out what we're going to do with some of the stuff we have and then strategically going after new things. So this is phenomenal. Just thinking back in the 30 years, this is my 17th year on the board. And so going from where we were meeting over near Kaiser Hospital in this funky split office to where we are now. So as we look forward to the work we're doing, I like to acknowledge some great strides. Just a couple quick things I would still want to talk about some sort of a founders, elders circle or something in Coyote Valley. So I don't want to just harp on that every time I get the microphone. And I think just the idea of emulating some of what Mid-Penn did up at Mount Umunhum with the stone, just the permanence, it's a natural material. I know it's not an inexpensive material, but I love the idea of having that be some of our kind of a signature feel as somebody goes to one of our preserves or parks that they know right away. I mean, as soon as they step foot and talk to a person, they can tell they're not at county parks. Say that amongst friends here, and count the public to that confidence. But it's just a different vibe when you come to one of our preserves, and I think that I'd like to extend that to the physical main side of it as well.
I'd love to speak to that. This issue came up actually when we were first developing our partnership agreement with Post around their involvement in Coyote Valley. And something that's fairly typical for them is they like to work with partners to reserve the site where they can recognize Post donors. We said, very good. And we would like to recognize the members of the public through Measure T voted to tax themselves, to include funding, right? As well as the Open Space Authority's directors, other partners and stakeholders. So we already anticipate there will be such a site that will be planned and designed in part through CDCAM.
Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
I'd like to back up a minute to the media and communications. This morning I went online to Open Space. It was the first time that I had seen the moving photographs, videos on the display, and it was great. I just think that just added a magic touch to being drawn into the website. What a compliment.
Thank you for that comment, Director Hill. And that was on the website or on the social media posts.
Let's-
Okay, great.
Move on, Kevin. Maybe it's a nice slope.
Hopefully not the same.
Right.
All right, so yeah, I wanted to start by thanking Director Potter for the TF. In addition to the lands that we're acquiring, we also have a number of new facilities being planned and coming online. So I'd like to, begin by talking a little bit, also got to hit on the threes at least a couple of times. So those are Mayanayakma, Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, which we're all working very hard, all with a capital A, on right now. We have the Rancho Cañada Virgin Day Use area. As you all heard about the other evening at the board meeting, that'll open up new lands for public access as well as provide important ADA accessibility at our preserves, expand our portfolio of accessibility, and of course, the Coyote Valley's Conservation Areas Master Plan, which is a comprehensive multi-benefit landscape. So switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about some of the activities that go on behind the scenes, our programs or the kind of functional other aspects of the planning department and what we do and what you won't see in our budget numbers, but they're really important and foundational to what we're doing for the agency. And I want to talk about how these as well as the projects connect to the themes that Andrea described. So there's sort of three big buckets. There's the strategic or long range planning bucket, the capital improvements bucket, and then our GIS systems. And so one difference in this year's work plan, which you'll notice, is that the GIS has been added to our department. So this has been a big year of transition for the planning department, a new planning manager. We have restructured our department to fold in two new programs, our GIS program, as well as the Coyote Valley's Conservation Areas Master Plan. And the project manager, Nick Perry, Anna McGarrigle, our GIS specialist, and Jennifer Hooper, our associate open space planner. So there's another three for you. Strong, mighty, small team doing a lot of great work. So moving back to the three program elements of the planning department. First is strategic planning. This includes kind of our mid-range and long-range planning. So you would include a project like Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan in this. We're also looking at the kind of mid-range management of some of our properties, along with other departments, field operations and natural resources, and what our plans are for leasing out those properties in the short and midterm, as well as what we might use them for in long range. We are working with stakeholders and community engagement on a number of fronts. We're working very closely with the county on the countywide trails master plan update. So we've been coordinating with them long before that plan is released to the public, and it reflects a lot of the work that we've been doing and the acquisitions that we've made around the county. Tribal partnerships is another big one, which is housed at Jennifer Hooper's our tribal liaison with the agency. And so making good connections to the tribes and incorporating them into our project work for all the capital work that we're doing. And then policy related to land use, where, along with Matt and his team and the property, commenting on development proposals within the county, and in particular within the 8948 area, where we're actually getting into the details on the development that's being proposed on a case-by-case basis, and providing comments on letters throughout the plan check process all the way up through CEQA. And then the other one I wanted to mention was the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network is another example of the State of the Trails project. You all heard from Dylan Skagro, I think it was last week. And so some great work going on there to coordinate a comprehensive trails plan that goes across agencies and takes into account many of the considerations we're looking at. So the second piece
is the capital improvements piece. It may seem kind of straightforward. It's building the projects, but there's a lot of front end and back end things that go into that as well. That includes all the analysis, CEQA, lot of contracting, with designers. We have, I think, we have 10 to 15 different contracts between our biologists, through our construction, the person constructing the facilities. And then also a big piece of that is project funding, like we talked about earlier, working closely with the grants team to secure project funding and make sure, well, we have a sustainable future in this types of things that we're talking about too. But a couple of good examples for that are the Yakima and Rancho, where we're securing funding for the vast majority of the project. It's pretty incredible. So project funding, not only from the bringing in outside funding standpoint, but also on an internal, how are our budgets aligned, which you'll see soon. And how does that work even into, the longer range with the capital improvements? Because as we know, these projects have a very long time frame with a lot of cost, and construction costs are probably the second biggest expense aside from acquisitions. And the GIS system, which has been brought in, is really about we'll tie that theme to organizational resiliency. So Anna's doing an amazing job revamping our systems. I'll talk about some of the projects that she's working on, but also reaching out to our agency partners to coordinate data and make sure we can share as well. Next slide. Sorry, that took longer than I was expecting. A few of the projects that you'll see from this year's work plan that I wanted to highlight. So in the strategic or long range planning category, Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan, that really touches on all of these themes we've been talking about. And it really is going to create a new type of place that we can engage our public with. And that's really the big idea here, is so the community can engage and learn about the agriculture. It's very accessible. So who are those users in our county that we really want to bring? And that's what we're going through with all the immense amount of public engagement that Mark talked about and Matt talked about that we're doing on that project. The second is the ADA transition plan, which is underway now. And was brought to the CAC last week, will be brought to the board this summer. It's really a comprehensive plan looking at both regulations and best practices and how we can do better to meet our GDI goals and make our facilities more accessible to the public, as well as our programs and the way we communicate out to the public as well. So a very important project that will lay out kind of this long-term strategy for implementation and prioritization. And capital improvements, like I talked about, several projects. And I wanted to highlight the two here in that, again, what we're focusing on is creating more accessible spaces that are accessible for a different population public that can serve our educational programming, different types of interpretive facilities that go beyond signage, like Mark talked about, non-language based interpretation. So these are a couple of the projects that are underway and will be constructed in the coming year or so. And then GIS. The GIS cloud storage system is a big project that Anna's undertaken, and this ties to our organizational resiliency. This is basically going to allow us to reformat and share our data internally in a very comprehensive and concise way, so that we can go out and use that data for things like ongoing monitoring at Yakima, so that staff can, for example, in the field, write down a point where they've seen somebody off trail and make a note of that, and we can collect that data and make a decision, an informed decision about how we want to adapt it, we want manage moving forward. And so that's kind of the gist of what that project is. So I will leave it at that if there's any question.
Any questions? I have one time real quick. So the GIS, that I'm fascinated with that. That could also be used for illegal dumping, right?
To monitor.
To monitor.
And track. Yes,
Right.
definitely. And so another project, and Derek can speak more, he's working directly with Ann on this, is really to create a tool that can be run on tablets or phones that our staff is using to do things like mark, like there was dumping here and they report it, and then we can, create a, I don't know what you'd call it, a work order.
But a tracking system, so right, so you could, if you see a pattern of, some particular person.
Yeah, it's gonna be a future project that we're working on to basically create what's called a maintenance management system, a database that we can work off of this, and then they would give us far greater accessibility to looking for trends and patterns.
Wonderful, thank you. And through the chair, if I may, we were hoping to break for lunch, and lunch is running a little bit late. So if it's okay with you, we could do another department presentation when you're ready, and hope lunch is delivered at the end of that. I'm the way my day is going today, yes. Oh, and lunch apparently just walked in there. So you just have to say something is right. Right, there's our three. So in that case, we propose if you're inclined to break for lunch in a few minutes, and then we'll resume with the other half of the presentation. Okay, wonderful. So we break. Okay. All right. Thank you for lunch. It was great. I believe that you have a response back to one of the questions, and then I'll get back to the presentation.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Kenneth was curious about the authority's acreage. So I have a table. It's a little complicated. I'll try to go through it slowly. But in terms of the properties that the Open Space Authority has purchased or owns outright in fee, we're at 16,839 acres. The properties over which we hold conservation easements, we're at 5,146 acres. We have assisted many other partners with their transactions. So land sales, transfers, assists, where maybe we've contributed funding or helped secure grant funding for other partners. And that's at 5,004 acres. And then as well, there are properties that we manage for other entities. So we effectively have site control. And that totals 1,852 acres. So when you total all that up, we're at about 28,841. So almost 29,000 acres. So
7,500 coming.
Yep.
So like as was mentioned, it would be nice that, you know, the golden spike, we hit the magic 30, but she's planting golden tree or whatever it's gonna be. Yes, I know. Anyway,
I look forward to sharing.
it's an excuse to, for our media folks to let the world know that we've done it.
All right, look forward to those numbers being radically different this time next year.
We do too. Thank you. Okay, now we will to our next presentation.
Great. My name is Aaron Hebert, Natural Resources Manager. The board had the pleasure of receiving a long presentation last week about the program, sort of what we're doing. So I won't repeat that here. I will make a couple points. Of course, the Natural Resources Department is the most new department, and you know, we've been here all of 7 months. One of the other points I would make in talking about the work of the programs and the department is, you know, something I said at my job interview, which is that everyone does natural resources work. You know, Lucas was talking about ecologically sensitive planning for public access. Much of Mark's work in public affairs, you know, is celebrating the biodiversity and wildlife that we care about, as well as the legislative part of protecting those species. Conservation initiatives is all about those species and protecting those values through acquisitions, through grant funding, et cetera. And of course, you know, my co-conspirator in field management, Derek's work is all about actually directly stewarding the land. So natural resources is both a, you know, distinct thing with all sorts of expertise that I described in the last meeting, and it's something kind of we all do in different ways. And it's, you know, why many people actually work at an agency like this. So, and with that in mind, one of the things I'll share too about natural resources is it's very much a service department. It is not a monolith that just does things on its own for the benefit of critters, but it's actually something that supplies all of those departments and programs with that perspective of, you know, what is right by the environment, what are our sort of our deepest values when we go about any kind of project. So I just want to highlight briefly some of the sort of big things that are happening next year. Mayan Ayakma Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve is of course opening that, opening. And sort of with that comes a sophisticated monitoring and adaptive management program to sort of see how it's going. The board received a presentation about butterfly habitat and all the considerations therein. So Lucas mentioned the GIS component of that. So our field staff have a tool on their phones or on an iPad to gather data in a systematic way. So it's not just kind of word of mouth. Hey, Aaron, I saw this, but it's actually spatially based and allows us to think about where those most sensitive habitats are, as well as, you know, how the public is utilizing them. So that's a big initiative in sort of doing right by the land. It definitely connects to the climate and community resiliency themes, people and nature as well. It's been a wet year. And, you know, part of doing field work is kind of rolling with the environment, the good and the bad there. In this case, you know, we have a window of time to manage invasive species, our integrated pest management program. And so that's really compressed the work that we have to do this year. Every time I meet with our natural resources technician to check in about how it's going, it's like, okay, next week we'll do this. The week after that, we'll do this, right? It's just been that kind of year, which is great for recharging our aquifers, of course, but has some consequences. So the other thing I'll mention about our IPM program, which is, you know, kind of the longest running natural resources program we have here, is that it's in its second season of early detection, rapid response, which is kind of that framework of, you know, really thinking about pernicious up and coming invasive species and just how to get a hold of them before they explode into a problem that costs the agency a lot of money and time. And there's a regional coordination effort along these lines as well. And then, as I mentioned in the presentation, lots of new stuff happening in natural resources, as makes sense, and some positions to implement new programs. Probably the most exciting of which is, you know, really starting an agricultural program with having a person in charge of that program. And that's one of those things where historically, I think everyone at OSA kind of works on agriculture. And I think that's, you know, everything from buying the land to maintaining it to planning what that stuff is. But having a person who's really got that expertise, I think both in, you know, things like how to grow carrots, but also how to get grant funding and partner with their, you know, farming and agricultural entities in our region. It's a pretty huge deal for the agency and is, you know, a part of our mission. It's one of the 4 themes that Andrea mentioned, agricultural sustainability. It's also got a people and nature connection. I think one of the goals for some of our agricultural work is to connect people to this rich agricultural valley that, you know, hasn't had the investment that it really should from that standpoint. So that's definitely an exciting program, and I'm looking forward to them sort of catalyzing our work in that space and helping us define what our sort of specific vision and role is in that, because there's a lot of opportunity on these underinvested lands. The other program I'll mention that's been in process, so it's not totally new, but is doing a bigger fuels management program. So, you know, right now I'll say that we're identifying our sort of top 10 to 15 projects, what those really look like. We have a sophisticated fire fuel model that's been developed that helps us think about the efficacy of some of those projects and programs. And then I think kind of what's outstanding is really to integrate on a regional effort. We're not the only people thinking about wildfire, of course. And then to actually staff that program in order to implement some of these projects. So at the presentation, I mentioned the Habitat Stewardship Program Manager. So it's a fairly high level position within the organization to do that work of defining the projects, figuring out how to staff it and support it, do it on the ground, partner with the various agencies in our area to do it, and to sort of lead the charge for that. So hopefully within the next fiscal year, we'll see, you know, a lot of movement on both of those sort of new programs, fuels management and agriculture. And then a really big chunk of the work from a technical perspective is really supporting CV Camp and the great planning work that Nick and the planning department are doing. That work contemplates very large scale restoration that that's super exciting, super compelling, kind of one of a kind in the Bay Area, I would say, in terms of its scale and the multiple benefits that it provides, both from wildlife connectivity between the ranges, floodplain benefits, groundwater recharge. And then, of course, there's an agricultural component to our planning in CV Camp as well. So, that's probably one of the bigger projects on my time card on the regular. And I think it deserves that. Some of our staffing in next year will also go to support that effort. So when we're dreaming big about how to do restoration, the technical side of that is supported by this department. Along those lines, as I think we mentioned last week in Nick and Lena's wonderful presentation about CV Camp and the engagement process, we're also working on some short-term actions in the restoration space to, learn about our ecosystem as well as, generate momentum to doing this larger scale restoration work. So the Stepping Stone project in Laguna Seca is really just how do we keep more water in there for longer? That's kind of the spirit of it. And there's a lot of technical and regulatory stuff that I won't get into, but the goal is to sort of say, hey, this is a really special wetland, one of the largest wetlands in the Bay Area, especially on the freshwater side. So how do we get the most out of that? The other area that we're working with, particularly with our partners at Post, is, really starting to study and understand how do we improve the wildlife corridor between the two ranges. So the Monterey Road feasibility study, I staff that in support of Post. And as I think Andrea mentioned last time at the meeting, we're also working a little bit in the 101 to figure out the sort of multiple barriers concept of, Highway 101, Monterey Road, as well as high-speed rail. So how do we get wildlife through those two spaces is something that's a long-term goal of ours, of course, that's part of CV Camp, but we're also taking some short-term actions to improve permeability of that landscape for critters. And then there are a number of ongoing, what I've called community restoration or community-based restoration projects at the South Pajaro Agricultural Preserve. We've got projects with our partner Point Blue and their straw program, which brings young people out to do plantings of various types. So it's both a restoration project that's quite important for species, has some floodplain benefits. Matt was describing the importance of the work in the Pajaro to do what we can to manage flooding. I think we all saw in the news this year that the Pajaro is really a challenged watershed in this way. Even though OSA only owns a small bit of land in the Pajaro, a lot of it is outside of our county. Doing our part, of course, is a big important thing there. We also have community-based restoration projects along Fisher Creek. One is on the Cusio property, which is kind of right off Palm Avenue. The other one is sort of further down on Fisher Creek. So the other projects that I didn't mention here that I think are interesting are sort of some of the watershed restoration projects, some of our ponds at Blair Ranch, which are important wetlands for both cattle and red-legged frog. Those are in progress, and pending the hiring of the watershed restoration specialists, we'll be able to take those over the finish line. So that's kind of an overview of the priorities of the department, the sort of theory of it. We talked a lot about last week, so I'll not belabor that. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Any questions? Yes, Dr. Blocker.
This is more of a comment than a question. I think with the work we've done, I'm really happy to see that we're putting more emphasis on the agricultural aspect. We sometimes forget that this was intended to be an agricultural area first and foremost, and housing as a secondary idea to fill it all up with concrete and whatnot. And I think we're at a crossroads where we need to get ahead of what's happening. We seem to be finding things that are new projects that are trying to get done by extraordinary means that we've seen in the past, where it is not natural to put down a typical house of this huge size. But we are always finding out after the fact. I think we need to be more proactive about it and say, where is the potential to have these kind of things happen? But we also can't just say we want to block things. We need to be able to go out and say, we have something that is useful to society in this part of this state. To make sure that we're not just can't do it, don't do it kind of organization. Agriculture is at that point where it's getting broken up to where you can't get machinery between the different disconnected pieces of agriculture. You're not going to get an 8-row combine down a road now with the kind of traffic happens. So what does that mean? If we're going to emphasize agriculture, what do we need to do? We need to reformulate how we think about agriculture. I'd like to see us encouraging people that want to come down and work with us and others to have agriculture that regenerates some of the things we had, which was Spina Farms for us. Why aren't we have a whole valley of Spina Farms and all these people that are building urban solutions to find vacant land here and there to do gardens for the community and whatnot. Let's put the garden spot to the South Bay and the rest of it. We need to think about farming we had before, family plots, 20 acres, 40 acres, that become not just a patchwork, but an integrated solution to feed the 2 million people of the county. We have companies that are interested in procuring local produce for their own internal cafeterias and their activities. I think we need to be the vanguard. I mean, we've partnered with county in this and come up with an agricultural plan, which just seems to be a document that just sets it. We need to be the leaders of what do we got to do? Well, if we don't have a cooperative of farmers in the area to put the machines and sheds together, to process food, to get it up to the rest of the urban areas, let's leave those discussions. There are people all over this country and in other countries that are doing these things. And I think this is the time that we need to lead that. Otherwise, the pressure to pave over Coyote Valley is going to get ahead of what we can do.
Thank you, Director Potter. Well, Aaron, I'm really glad you're doing this, because if I hear one more time from someone that agriculture isn't viable in Coyote Valley, when we saw the height of the sunflowers and Spina Farms, well, if you garden at all, you know that you have to have good soil for things to grow. So I think Director Potter is right. We have to lead on efforts and show people why agriculture is still very much viable and what the economic benefit is to producing your local food source, that we're saving money and right instead of like paving over paradise. So thank you for this work.
I hear here. I guess I'll add for the interest of the board that not mentioned here, but you'll see at some point a request for proposal for a property off Palm Avenue right near Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve. It's literally right adjacent to the parking lot. It aims to fulfill many of the goals Director Flocker mentioned. Mark and I are also meeting with a number of regional and state level agricultural thinkers, advisors, etc. So even though we'll be hiring an agricultural specialist, they'll take time to get on board. They'll pick up the agricultural plan document and start sort of defining our niche, because I think you're right. There's a lot at stake with the ag program. It complements the conservation, sort of traditional conservation work that, folks like me sort of grew up doing in many ways. And there's this wonderful opportunity to engage people in our work. What I love about the idea, and you'll see this in the Palm Avenue RFP, is, agriculture and relating to food is a great way to relate to land and to place. And so I like to think of, Spina Farms and hopefully what we're doing at Palm as a way for kids, families, people who may not traditionally associate with open space or that kind of like single track recreation wilderness thing that many of us got attracted to. But in fact, they come for a regular kind of, exciting experience. And then they see our parking lot right over there and think I could hike over there. So it's all connected. I think everyone at the agency is excited about this positioning program.
Through the chair, if I can just add on and say an additional here. Yeah, Director Flower, your remarks are spot on. We can't just be on the defensive. So I just wanted to circle back a little bit to the interdepartmental idea of, conservation initiatives. Some of the work that Mark is leading, folks on my team include supporting the county development of the climate overlay, right? So reducing the footprint that is available to develop, on properties that have agricultural production potential. And then really getting ahead of the curve too, working through the RENA process, the amount of housing that can be allocated to avoid overdeveloping, in some of the agricultural areas, really supporting the county's zoning, general plan in that way. And working through Plan Bay area, right? Identifying priority development areas. And then Mark is leading on our feedback to priority conservation areas to make sure we're really identifying the most important places to avoid development where we can implement projects just like the ones Aaron described, right? Regenerative, equitable farming practices that are producing food for our local communities. So it's all connected. A lot behind the scenes. Mark, you're leading so much of this work. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I just want to add my expression of appreciation for your remarks to Director Blocker. There is so much to be done on ag viability generally. It's a very complicated picture, and we are protecting farmland, but there's so much more to be done. And one thing specifically that I can point to is towards the end of April, we're coordinating a tour with a local urban farming partner to bring the Department of Conservation Director and some of his staff from the state of California down here, and along with the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Food and Agriculture for Climate and Agriculture to have discussions about what else we could be doing at a big picture level like you're talking about. So really, really appreciate your comments.
All right. Good afternoon, directors. Derek Newman, Field Operations Manager for the Open Space Authority. And outside of the work plan, we don't generally have a lot of work plan projects. A lot of our stuff is just kind of behind the scenes. Every now and again, you can get those larger projects, and that's generally maintaining the facilities that we have out there or responding to some other like natural event that we just experienced in 2023. So for us, the first and biggest foremost thing that we're going to be doing that's going to be behind the scenes is going to be Perry Ridge. This is unlike any of the other preserves. You heard me talk about that a little bit more. And it's our highest value habitat that we're going to have in the preserve. So we're going to be spending a lot of staff time out there. And included in that is really a lot of interpretation that's going to be going on. So Terry Marboy's department is going to be really focused out there, offering guided hikes out there, interacting with the visiting public out there. Gavin Comstock's department with the volunteers is going to be highly engaged, helping staff with management of all the personnel, all the people that are going to be coming out to the preserve as well, engaging them early on, informing them of just how special a place this is,
and so that they can care for the land as we want them to, and be able to enjoy it for all of the generations to come after them as well. So a lot of our time can be spent there. The next one is, now that we're out of the pandemic, we're going to be re-engaging with the community. There's a really big, robust schedule of community outreach events scheduled for this year. We're going to be re-engaging in those communities and really outreaching to them to get them to know who the Open Space Authority is, invite them out to our preserves, and get them engaged with Terry's programs that are going to be going back out to those communities as well. Not just on our preserves, but in the communities themselves where these programs are going to be taking place. After that, we're going to be doing a lot more environmental education expansion. But we're going to be trying some new stuff. One of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing some campfire talks on weekend nights in appropriate locations. Obviously, we're very well aware of wildfires, but these are going to be, we're going to get the little iron rings, set it up so that people can come out and enjoy campfires. We're going to be able to allow them to make s'mores afterwards. So for all those families that cannot go out and go camping during the summertime, there's going to be an opportunity for them to come out, learn about environmental education, and have that kind of camping atmosphere out on both Tilton and over at Rancho Cañada del Oro. So we're going to be looking at doing that. We're going to be focused now that we weren't anticipating on some repairs from 2023 storms. We did have some damage on the properties. Generally, it's going to be Rancho Cañada del Oro and Sierra Vista, our two usual suspects for these here. We do have some pretty decent repairs to do to roads that were damaged in the storms themselves. One from a slip out beneath it over at Rancho Cañada del Oro, the other one from a slide that came down onto it over at Picardo, as well as extensive debris removal, generally trees that had come down on the trails. We've opened up all the trails, but we still have a lot of debris on either side of the trails that we'll need to chip up and get out of the way. And that really ties into what we do for fire out there as well, making sure that we don't have any large amounts of vegetation next to the trails so that we can defend for fires if necessary out there. We're going to be continuing one of the things that we started last year, which is changing over a lot of our fencing to wildlife friendly fencing for our grazing operations. A lot of the historic grazing operations have had basically 5 strands of barbed wire. We're going to be changing that up to a standard now that where it has smooth wire on the top and bottom. It allows the wildlife to be able to transition through the fences a lot easier for them. And they don't have an opportunity to get this stuck as they would in the past. Also, a lot of these fences are in disrepair. They were put back in the 50s and 60s. So a lot of them are loose, which is also a very big, dangerous situation for the animals. The looser the wires are, the more opportunity the animal has for getting caught inside the wire. The more stretched out it is, the more tight, the more that it moves out of the way of the animal as it passes through the fence. One of our biggest things that we're going to be doing, and so up until this point, we're talking about people and nature. It kind of ties back into Andrea's big overall themes. One that we're going to be talking about now is organizational resiliency. Is we're working on a collaboration with Mid-Peninsula Open Space District and County Parks, kind of at a supervisor manager level. We're having meetings every couple of months where we invite staff to talk about topics that are relevant to our management of the preserves and our parks within our systems. And it really starts to promote cross collaboration of techniques that we're seeing, trends that we're seeing at different agencies. As you know, we are not exactly like either one of those. Some of the things that MidPen deals with, we don't yet, but we might in the future. Same thing with county parks too. And hearing from them kind of what they have going on, what their constraints and concerns are, really helps us to prepare for those eventualities, and the vice versa from us as well. Kind of a key example of this is next week, we have some MidPen staff coming down and taking a look at our chainsaws that we ended up going into electric chainsaws. So they're coming down to get an idea of how those run, if they're efficient, effective, so that they can start their transition process into it. And it kind of ties it into the next one, which is climate resiliency for us, which is the electrification of all of our field tools and equipment. I almost said toys. Because there is part of it that will be toys too. We do look at some of them as toys, but this is the true electrification of everything that we do or that we use for the field, from hand tools like chainsaws, weed whips, power pruners to ATVs and UTVs to the actual vehicles that we use to transport us to and from those locations. And we've started that process this past year. You have two really competitive people here at the Open Space Authority. Justine and myself are probably the most competitive. So once I went to the maintenance management school and learned that Mid-Penn had already like is well along the way, kind of like, okay, we need to get going now. I cannot let Mid-Penn beat us to the full electrification of this. So that, but it is it's a really serious thing that we're going to be taking into consideration here as we use the tools. We'll still keep the existing tools that we have as backups, but the primary use for them will be the field staff will be using all electric as much as possible as we transition to it. Now, there are some aspects that we don't have to go to electrification because we do have some exemptions, but we're going to basically not follow those exemptions, and we're going to go as much as possible to full electrification of everything, including even larger vehicles. Some things will wait a little bit longer, and that's simply to let the technology catch up to where we need it to. When the first chainsaws came out, for example, their batteries would only last 10 minutes. That's not effective for being able to manage our lands. Now they've gotten to a point where they last about 45, 50 minutes, which is generally a full fuel tank worth of time. So that's where we're now transitioning over. And they're actually coming out with even better technology. So it's really exciting to be a part of this and get this going. I hope that we're first in the county when we're all said and done, but I'll take second. It doesn't matter. And the key result here, though, is that we do accomplish this, and it's better for the environment and it's better for our staff. And I think overall, it's the right thing to do. And with that, I'll take questions.
Any questions? Right. Yeah, Director Fly.
Yes, thank you. Right there, electrification. I got to use an electric chainsaw because my gas one wouldn't start. Seen that. And I was amazed at how they've developed it over the last few years. And just having an extra battery pack or two and, a sharp chain. And I was able to take down 3 30-foot tall privets with that electric chainsaw. And I'm convinced I don't need that gas powered one anymore. So I think that's good. And I'm glad you're thinking all the way through the larger vehicles. And I think we're going to see in the next few years a turn toward much more power in a much more compact, including hydrogen fuel cell operation taking over lithium ion, because lithium ion mineral mining is detrimental to the environment. So battery electricity is the motor, not a gasoline powered, but we'll see even more power in smaller packages. So I'm going to and beat them. Don't wait. It's like
You might be having some requests coming to the board for money. Talk a little bit about the technology. I mean, when we first started, the batteries were about 4 pounds each to go into the tools. They've now reduced those to about 2 pounds. So the tools are a little bit lighter than the fuel. But more importantly, they've actually started to develop backpacks. These backpacks last basically about 4 or 5 of their standard batteries, and it's connected by a cable. So now the tools are much lighter. So that fatigue that we were running into with the gasoline powered and all those other ones of holding these really heavy tools, that's becoming a non-factor now. The tools themselves are only about 4 pounds as opposed to the 10 pounds that they were running. So this technology is actually really cool, and it's really beneficial for just wear and tear on all of our field technicians.
Any other questions? Thank you, Eric. All right, now I can say good afternoon, directors. Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager of Administrative and Field Operations. Not only do I have the pleasure of having both Derek and Aaron as direct reports, I also oversee the Administrative Operations Department. So a quick glimpse at the team and what they do. We have Justina Teen heading up our accounting and finance. also information technology, and she's joined by Elisa D'Angelo, who was here earlier in the accounting and finance realm. Also our intern, John Yo, and then Vincent Tran with our information technology. Caroline Hernandez, and a player to be named later, oversees our governance and transparency in the clerk's office as well as records management. And then Elizabeth Loretto, Office and Facilities Management, along with Ivy Rylander, risk management, and the one that you know her for best, that I think we think of her most often is human resources. So that's a glimpse at the team. And my presentation is organized a little differently. We're going to go straight from the theme. So I like to think about our organizational resiliency like putting the agency's oxygen mask on first. We simply cannot meet any of the moments Andrea is going to describe for you shortly if we do not have organizational resiliency. And administrative operations really centers around and drives these concepts. So with that, Justina, thank you. You may have been wondering though why I should have said this first, why you chose a picture of people in safety gear to represent this financial piece. Well, those three folks, and you'll see them again in a moment, are members of our expenditure plan oversight committee. And they were out on a field trip to Mayanu Yakima, seeing our Measure Q dollars in action. And I thought maybe the directors would appreciate seeing that committee in action. So we have to have sufficient funding, obviously, to deliver all the projects you've been hearing about from my colleagues and to ensure the agency continues to be well positioned as a conservation leader in Santa Clara County. So as the board is aware, our agency's revenue is flat at approximately $12 million a year. However, operating expenses continue to grow due to our expanding portfolio of work, strategic acquisition, large scale projects, staffing needs, and of course, that little thing we all know, inflation. Led by our accounting and finance team, staff has endeavored to forecast our future revenue needs and created several models, a very large Vision 2035, a very aggressive plan, but also a couple of more modest yet still ambitious plans. With our financial needs identified, we'll be working with experts to explore possible future funding mechanisms that will satisfy these needs and secure the agency's financial future. As the agency has always done with the public's money, we continue to be fiscally responsible, using our funds wisely and leveraging outside funds wherever possible. You heard earlier about the grant program. You've heard also the work that Mark Shop is doing. Our grants team provided a stat of the 1.8, I think is a recap of what Matt mentioned earlier, $1.8 million in grants secured, including one new funder, the Department of Water Resources over the last year, and more in the pipeline to be announced in the fall. And all of that is on top of the $25 million in grant funding that we're putting to good work right now. And of course, the additional dollars leveraged through our legislative affairs and other partnerships. All right, next slide, please. Our funding allows us not only to deliver on our mission, it allows us to attract, retain, and develop the best team in open space. Am I right? The best team in open space. Having the right people in the right place at the right time helps the agency punch above its weight. Our human resources program team makes sure that we're the leader in this area. We are intentional about the positions we add to the roster and consider not only the current, but the future needs of the agency so that we hire folks who can grow and evolve with us. We aim to bring folks of various backgrounds, represent our community, have different lived experiences and points of view, and also fit our culture of valuing innovation, inclusivity, collaboration, personal achievement, kinship, and contributing to a mission that is bigger than any one of us. Of course, attracting top talent is only one part of our focus. We take employee engagement and retention just as seriously. We have intentionally created an environment to support staff as full people with policies and practices such as paid traumatic event leave, clarifying leave available for mental health care, extending our bereavement leave, not only the number of hours of paid time off, but also in the definition of a relationship that qualifies for such a leave. offering flexible working hours and 3 days remote work per week. We'll continue ensuring that the Open Space Authority is an employer of choice with equitable pay and innovative HR policies and practices. And we aim to bring to the board new additions to our employee handbook in the fall. We're focusing on giving the next generation of agency leaders opportunities to step up into stretch assignments, working directly with other agency leaders and making their voices heard while advancing their professional development. We're currently working with staff to put framework or architecture around several areas of operation so they can share their points of view and exercise and further develop their leadership skills. We are proud to be able to promote from within, and we did so 5 times last year. Additionally, we were able to bring 2 seasonal staff members into permanent positions when those became available. So we're working very hard at hiring smart. We're even more proud to say that next year's staffing plan, when you see it in June, include additional promotional opportunities. Next slide, please, Justina. So to ensure operational excellence and that our talented staff can excel in their roles, we take a light on the people approach to building policies and protocols that provide framework to guide our work, provide clarity, and still allow for innovation. We are proud of the agency's Certificate of Transparency and District of Distinction accreditation through the Special District Leadership Foundation. Both of these achievements show the authority's commitment to transparent governance, ethical and sound operations, and prudent fiscal policies, as well as the forward thinking of our governance and transparency program from the clerk's office. As the agency takes on a broader variety of projects and our work expands in scale, complexity, and pace, we're taking a hard look at the basics to make sure that roles and handoffs are clarified, systems are efficient and designed by folks who know the work best, and communication is constant, clear, and intentional. In fact, our architecture projects aim to tap cross-departmental teams and will address role clarity, communication, project management, taking on new business, cross-departmental coordination, all to help improve operations. Examples of other projects lined up for fiscal year 23-24 in this area include asset management needs and software that Derek mentioned earlier. Our information technology team will assess our file storage and data security needs to determine if we stay on local servers, migrate fully to the cloud, or maintain some sort of combination. And then once that's decided, protocols for retention, organization, and naming our files. We aim to bring our record retention policy into the 2020s, which most of other agencies have not done. So all the projects that you've heard about today, I suspect this is not the one you planned on sharing with your friends later, but this is actually very cutting edge work. All of the projects will tap subject matter experts and stakeholders from across the agency. And of course, our justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility staff working group continue to identify opportunities to incorporate these principles into our everyday work as well. All right, last but not least, we are aware that our operations have an impact on the very land, water, and critters that we aim to protect. As you heard from Derek, our field team really has led the way in electrifying, it will always be electrifying, our operations in order to reduce our carbon footprint. So currently using electric tools, as you heard, and that's really helped us come to the realization that it changes the way we operate. Not only in procedurally, you don't just take a tool and you've got a plan for batteries, you've got a plan for recharging, means our infrastructure and not only this office, but any reporting station will have to change to make sure that these tools are continually available. Our office and facilities management team also plan to seize opportunities to make more environmentally friendly choices in making repairs or new purchases. We recently had an opportunity, for example, to replace some lights here in the office, and we opted for more energy efficient LED lights than what we inherited in the building. In addition to the one electric vehicle that we do own, you've heard the plans to add more vehicles that run on electricity, and I think you're aware that we've added EV chargers here in the office, and we'll have to consider those for other reporting stations as well. Like anywhere else in nature, a healthy ecosystem is critical to organizational survival so that it is around for years to come, operating at its fullest potential and able to seize new opportunities. The administrative operations will lead the agency through this long-term, to this goal through long-term financial sustainability, succession planning, agency sustainability, and managing our carbon footprint. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Any questions? Director Flauer.
Sorry, the first three. I didn't say. Not a slight. You got it.
You just needed lunch.
I just need to. There you go. So I'm glad to hear this. Most people don't get excited about filing systems.
It takes a special kind of person.
It is, yeah, strange that it is. But if you think about it, it's where you record who you are, your culture, your procedures, your policies. So anybody, whether they're an internal hire or an external person that wants to know more about the agency, has a place to go look for those things. Most organizations, and I've seen them of all sizes, don't do that. And because of that, they have to keep relearning how to do what they do. Because there's no institutional knowledge. And it's very common, and probably the military is better good at this than most civilian firms because it costs money to do. But if you think about the cost of relearning, the cost of redoing, the cost of not being able to express yourself, it's essential. So I just wanted to thank you for that forward thought.
Yeah, thank you. We agree. We think part of one, just the smoothness of operations, being able to find the things you need. And that when you do find them, the information is current. It's really important for succession planning, right? As we're going to train new folks as we are working cross-departmentally, there's a lot of things to communicate. So having our records in order, well documented, I think is really important.
So I have one more point. But if you take principles out of ISO 9000, you will find that documenting everything to the nth degree will bury you.
I would agree with you there too.
So, and I've seen that done. If you give somebody in the field manuals that are this deep and say you have to follow everyone on pain of losing your job, you won't get what you're expecting. So there is a balance that has to be achieved between knowing what to do. There was a famous case of a company here in Silicon Valley in the early 90s. BSI was first introducing ISO 9000, that they passed certification ahead of many other companies, and they were audited by BSI, and BSI said, "This guy's got this stuff together." It was a small company, but they had a ISO 9000 program. Everybody knew what they were supposed to be doing. The auditors questioned everybody, and they could build and manufacture effectively within those standards. And they had almost no documentation. So there's times to do it and times not to do it. So it's an important balance that you find.
I agree. Thank you. What else? Thank you, Lee.
Okay, Madam Chair, we're going to kind of wrap it up and then we'd love to hear more back from the board, anything you want to throw at us. But just to kind of connect the dots of what we heard from all of our managers from the leadership team, I want to just make kind of some closing remarks. And I'll start by saying I don't have to tell you and this board that we are living in very chaotic and ambiguous times here in our region and our communities in the world. And with all of that swirling around us, we're trying to create a future for this agency so that we'll be around for a long time to come. So we're kind of thinking about that as the OSA 3.0. What does that look like? What are we doing? What are we accomplishing? What niche are we filling? How are we advancing the needs of our community? So this is going to require us to be adaptive and innovative and flexible, collaborative with our partners and here in the agency. We really understand what it's going to take organizationally and financially to address these challenges that are facing us and to what many have called meeting the moment. At the holidays, I shared a book with all of you, which I hope you had a chance to thumb through, that I've been quite inspired by, and I think some of the findings of that book have found its way into our key themes and our work plan priorities and what is driving us as a passionate staff. And that book is Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard's book, Let My People Go Surfing. And I want to share with you some of my thinking that's come out of this book that shapes what we're being called to do in the next several years, how we're readying the agency in response to the many significant environmental, social, political, economic challenges that are happening all around us and we're reading about in the news every single day. And so how should we be meeting the moment? So I want to share kind of 8 ways with you that we need to be meeting the moment. First, we're being called to meet the moment by taking bold and transformative actions to protect the natural world, which is our life support system. And I think the natural world as a life support system is oftentimes an afterthought by many of our decision makers. We're being called upon to articulate the relevancy of nature, both to the general public and to our decision makers, and to inspire increased investment in protecting and restoring nature. Nature matters. Nature has a huge return on investment. We need to be thinking about nature when we're making our budgets, when we're putting grant programs together, when we're setting the agenda for cities and counties. Nature belongs there. We're being called upon to protect and steward an interconnected system of natural and working lands for biodiversity, connectivity, ecological resiliency, community health, climate resiliency. We're being called upon to make access to open space and parks more equitable and accessible more than any moment in time. We're being called upon to ensure organizational resiliency and financial sustainability, because we need to make sure that the OSA continues to effectively implement its mission for generations to come. Many of you are familiar with the Native American concept of 7 generations. Mike Potter talked about how he served on this board for 17 years and what this agency and organization was like 30 years ago. We're doing some pretty impressive work, but what about 30 years from now when none of us are here? So that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about. We're being called upon to create an environment where the next generation of environmental stewards is empowered and ready to lead. So passing on that wisdom, providing opportunities for leadership, giving the requisite skills and training, passing down what we know. And I think that is really important, both from the leadership team and from the board. I think we have one of the most awesome public boards of any public agency in this county. Many of you have served for many years, so who's going to be sitting in your chairs a decade from now or longer from now? So how are we passing that on and making sure that we're laying the groundwork for the future leadership? We're being called upon to create a strong supportive agency. We call this an emergent culture of inclusion, trust, belonging, communication, collaboration, both within the agency and with our partners and outside the agency. A number of our partners call us Switzerland. We try to live that. That doesn't mean we don't take principled positions when we need to. But we want to bring people together so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the little bit of funding that we have, when combined with federal and state funding, local funding, really gets the job done, gets so much more done than just the Open Space Authority could do on its own. And last but not least, and I'm hearing this from a lot of leaders these days, and principally I'm hearing it from a lot of women leaders, that we're being called to lead with love, integrity, and a strong vision and sense of purpose. So, on behalf of the entire leadership team, I want to thank you for your attention and joining us today. We would love to hear more from the board about what's landing with you, what you're most excited about, what's most resonant for you, what questions you may have beyond those you've already asked, and what you think our impact as an agency can be as we try to protect and restore the natural and working lands, benefit people and nature in this county for years to come. So this is a gathering today. It's not a budget hearing. It's a sharing of ideas. It's ideation. It's feedback. Any other thoughts you want to share with the staff today? We'd love to hear them. Thanks.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to call Doug Muirhead, I believe, a comment for public comment. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members, staff, members of the public that bothered to attend today. My name is Doug Muirhead. I'm a resident of Morgan Hill. I very much enjoyed the multiple department overviews. I'm especially pleased to have heard comments both from board and staff supporting agriculture. It's an area I'm hopeful for. I won't say more about that. Here are a couple of random questions that are of interest to me. They may or may not be of interest to you. The general manager started off mentioning under agriculture that you were going to do things with food security. Other than your grants to urban gardening, I'm not aware of anything that would fall under that heading. So I hope in the future we'll be hearing more details about what you might want to accomplish in that area. Also on agriculture, back when you had your outdoor board meeting at Tilton Ranch, one of the things I suggested was farmer incubators. But the real question for me is I haven't heard much about Tilton Ranch, the use of the house and the programs, other than dedicating an outbuilding to Habitat Agency for some of their equipment. So I'm curious about that. The Water District and one of the universities is doing a study on flood managed recharge, FloodMar. I'm not exactly sure where they stand with that. We're aware of the governor's executive order allowing diversion of high flows for recharge. My question to you is, what do your conservation easements allow or prevent or conditionally evaluate in terms of the lands that you have responsibility for and the ability to take advantage of excess water, as they call it? As far as GIS, a number of agencies have applications that allow the public to submit observations, make requests and that sort of stuff. And so as you have your tablets and mobile phones and that sort of thing reporting by staff, I hope you would consider the ability of a public portal as well. And then because I was asked earlier, did I think I'd learned something new, and I kind of hedged. Let me do a tip of the hat to Mark for explaining the difference between translation and I believe what he called transcreation new content working backward from cultural relevance. So the public has spoken. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, at this point, shall I open up to the board? Who wants to start? Director Flocker, come on, come on. Lead us off in an engaging conversation. No? All right, I see Director Animal. Cool.
As you're going about your work, I would like to have the boards have a presentation on Fisher Creek. And it doesn't connect all the way to Laguna Seca, right? And then how is that going to become a tool in terms of the goal to keep water in Laguna Seca? I think that that area being so close to the urban area, it's going to be really important how we plan it. And I think for us as a board in making decisions about the watershed and understanding which creeks are the most critical and what can we do regarding those creeks, it's important work for us.
Madam Chair. As the board raises certain questions or has ideas, would you like staff to respond to you, or do you want to kind of go through everybody first?
You want to do a response first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair. Yeah, this is Aaron Aber, Natural Resources Manager. Yeah, talking about Fisher Creek. I'll be a pig in mud for that day. It'll be excellent. Sounds like a request to get a little bit a deeper dive into some of the restoration planning, watershed restoration planning that we're doing in CV Camp. There's a lot there. I mentioned in my remarks that it's a not insignificant part of the natural resources program next year. So we'll get back to you. I'll confer with Nick, who's the project manager, and the general manager to find an appropriate time to brief the board and bring you in on that.
I want to thank all of you. That was really informative. I love seeing how all the departments have their own focus, but work together for the agency goals. And it's obvious there's a lot of communication and planning within the agency. And I just really appreciate that. I'm glad to see the very direct focus on agriculture, and I look forward to seeing more about that. I'd be interested in the Fisher Creek restoration and what's going on with Laguna Seca. And also would love to hear more about specific climate smart projects that might be put forward with San Jose, because I think that's a great way to have visibility with the city. And like Mark said, to really give the city a win while also advancing joint objectives. So I think that's great. And the Pajaro Valley, I think is interesting to see what we do with that. Maybe using Coyote Valley as a model for the Pajaro Valley. So that's just, thank you all very much.
Director Potter.
Thank you. This was really a helpful overview. I know we've got some new folks and some formerly active and engaged folks who are new again today and on our board. And so I can come back to sometimes some routine and basic things like we have a building now, we have a headquarters. Like, is that we're gonna be growing? I think that's we're going up and to the right. And so, do we have enough room here? How are we situated for our facilities? I love that you brought up Tilton Ranch. I'd love to know more about what our plans are there. I think that's was not a small acquisition, but it was a really good one. And then another really good acquisition that we made a long time ago was Blair. And so I know we're starting to move into that, but this next phase is going to shift us from a strong but mighty or smallish but mighty group in the field to they're going to be our largest segment of employees, I think, in the future. So how do we do that and hire people and keep people and be able to pay people? Just not as fun as CV, the Coyote Valley planning process, but it's like actually what we've got to do.
Through the chair, if I could respond to at least to the office and maybe a little bit to your last question as well. It's true, we're really out of space as configured here. So one of the other projects I didn't mention for the upcoming year is to look at our office space and the possibilities of what we can do with what we've got. We have explored possibilities of additional reporting stations, for example, out at Tilton. We've been using some space out at Alum Rock Park for our Sierra Vista team. That lease is coming to a close here very quickly. So yeah, we have a lot of things to figure out about how we want to use our space and use what we've got. And then just a quick comment to the end of your questions about I think field staff and how do we attract, retain. I know Derek has a lot of thoughts on staff development. It's one of the things on the top of our list for making sure that the folks we bring in, like I said in my earlier comments, are really ready to grow and evolve with us. Really looking at the career ladder. We do have career ladders now in the field, but deepening those, presenting more opportunities and making sure folks are getting the training that they need in order to progress. And this is true throughout the agency, but we agree there's a lot of growth in the field, and by far, Derek's got the largest department. I'll cue you up to take it from there if that's okay.
Yeah, I think for us, what we're really looking at and we're going to be really focusing on over the next year or two is working with Gavin Comstock to look at our volunteer program and how we can ramp that up in what we call the preserve stewards, which are the ones that go out and help us with visitor management. These are the ones that would help us greet at the parking lots, help us manage traffic flow at the preserves, and then also be our eyes and ears out on the trails as well, helping so it frees up our technicians to be able to do more maintenance type work. And then also with that would be enhancing even more our Trail Masters program, which has been really successful in engaging volunteers to come out and do more hands-on preserve work, not just trails, but actually building trails, maintaining trails, but also helping us with wildlife friendly fencing. So we're really trying to see what staff are critical to help us leverage those staff with an exponential amount of volunteers that can come out and help field staff so that we can keep not only engage the public in wanting to care for the Open Space Authority and have an actual invested interest in the Open Space Authority, but then also make sure that we're being most responsible with how many field staff we're asking for, thinking about that financial stability. So really trying to leverage that with volunteers as we move forward.
I'm sure if I can address a couple of other questions Director Potter raised, and then Lucas and Aaron, I might call on you if there's anything you'd like to amend to these comments. So you'll see a more robust presentation, including a list of proposed fiscal year 23-24 work plan projects, but they include, among other things, a focus on developing a plan for what we're calling the Blair Backcountry Trails. So how do we connect the improvements that'll be completed this fiscal year, right, at the Yagas Meadow, and then go up to the former Blair property and connect people to nature there? That's one of the most popular, areas we hear frequently from the public, partners, volunteers, like a lot of interest and excitement, and opening some of those trails to the public. And we're really interested in doing it in a very conscientious way to protect biodiversity. Really important, mountain lion area. So how do we, integrate, denning sites and breeding locations and, not love that place to death with people. So anyway, that's going to be a really exciting project. We've had preliminary conversations with the State Coastal Conservancy. they have I think they've expressed a lot of interest. They're looking forward to a grant application to pay for that planning work. So that's a pretty exciting partnership there. And then Tilton is another project that's it's a proposed project in the work plan. It'll really be contingent on our ability to recruit for a senior planner who can manage a project that's so complex, because we're looking at not just the 60-acre Tilton Ranch headquarters, but then how do we integrate that with a larger property that's subject to the Habitat Agency conservation easement. So we want to bring the senior planner on board so that she or he can really lead that project from the get-go and then not inherit something that's already in midstream. And I'm forgetting a couple of others, but if it's appropriate to address a few of Mr. Muirhead's comments as well. Food security is it's a huge challenge, right? How do we help, society provide reliable and nutritious foods, right? To the community members that most deserve it, right? So there's a lot of focus in third world countries, but it's easy to overlook our own neighborhoods, communities where we've got disadvantaged communities. So we certainly don't have it figured out, but when we've applied for grant funding to acquire agricultural lands, one of the many important things we say, this is in service of, long-term agricultural viability, doing what we can to, at least have the foundation for supporting local food security. So we don't know exactly how that touches down, but the first step is preserving the base of lands that can support agriculture and not seeing, kind of our precious and irreplaceable farmlands, lost to development. But through another potential project in the work plan is development of an agricultural strategic plan. And Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but through that process, we can, begin identifying some of the tools that maybe we have Open Space Authority can do to address that. So, for example, as we're working on leases with, future agricultural tenants, or we're working on, buy, protect, sell models, where maybe we sell property subject to a conservation easement. We've always heard from farmers, don't tell us how to farm, don't tell farmers how to farm. But is there anything we can do to direct, these operations to be in service of security, equitable access to farmland, regenerative operations? So there's a little bit of a balance there, but it's really, really helpful to hear, there's interest by the board and the community for us to get into this space. Okay. I feel like I'm forgetting some things. I'll pause though, and maybe we'll come back and, more discussion in a moment.
Floodmar. Floodmar.
Oh, Floodmar. Yeah, Aaron, this is another one. Do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so for the benefit of our listeners or others, Floodmar is a sort of new-ish concept at the state level that basically looks at using floodwaters, so-called excess water, say like we have in maybe the Fisher Creek watershed, and really trying to use it to recharge groundwater specifically. So the connection locally for us, of course, is that, groundwater is managed in the Coyote Valley Basin for agriculture or for municipal supplies. And we also have flooding problems both within the basin and, of course, in the city of San Jose. So the projects that we're contemplating in CV Camp really get at that idea of sort of stacking benefits of some of our activities. We'll say that one of the tricky things is not all areas are equally good for recharging groundwater. So, figuring out the specific sort of porosity of the soils and the rock formations, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. And that's why they tend to be sort of these, academic or geologically intensive studies. So this is part of CV Camp, and the planning that we're doing there is, what are we doing with the water we have available in the Fisher Creek watershed? What's its, highest and best use, to use a real estate term?
One quick addition there is Dr. Andy Fisher from UC Santa Cruz, who's collaborating with Valley Water on the Floodmar project, is an advisor to the CV Camp process. So we'll be, through his expertise in particular, identifying some opportunities to collaborate. Is there there? And if so, what are the management techniques that can help us implement our conservation values? He's also shared, connecting this to the GIS program, that one of the deliverables that he's assisting Valley Water with is a really, really comprehensive GIS data set And we can expect that shortly. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Couple comments. One, I find the staff here to be, you set the bar. I mean, I can't, I'm prejudiced. I work for bureaucracy, but you set the bar in terms of responsiveness and advocacy and being flexible and pivoting when there's a situation. And I think you are a leader and you don't really know that you're a leader in this because I think we kind of be a little bit unassuming. But I think it's time to flex our muscle a little bit. I say that because when we're listening to Andrea's comments about institutional memory and government and some of the leaders, and I hear comments because we do kind of have to re-educate people over and over again. This is who we are, this is what we do, get new people in office, we have to re-educate and go on. But I think there's a beneficial to that environmental education expansion. Also applying to political leaders and also applying in not just the community, but people that are boards and commissions. And if there's any way that we can keep inserting ourselves into that public process, maybe it's a greater communication policy, like let's make sure we get, a goal is to get one of our opportunities into a newsletter every month, right? Just, every one of the council districts, right? So we're always monthly showing up somewhere so people know constantly what we're doing. I love what we're doing. And I think we don't often share enough that what the work we're doing is so critically valuable. And it makes, and I hate to be, I don't want to see us in the defensive position. I want to see us in the offensive position because I think that's where we are. And I don't know if I'm coming across well enough, but I think, for those that know me, this is my love. This is, the work of the environment, the open space. And I think, and I will say for everybody here, when I saw the message that came from City Hall this year, I was gravely disappointed that there was not the word green, environment, climate, park, trail, anywhere in there. And I think we can set the bar higher and then change the conversation to say, come along with the city of San Jose. We're the leader and we want you to come along because they're not going to lead. So I think if that's again where we need to be on the offensive instead of the defensive, because I think we only have one planet, right? And without that, you can build all the amount of housing you have and all the work you want to have. And if we don't have planet, there's nothing to build on. So I mean, it's kind of, I give myself box now, but can't say anymore. But thank you. I think it's you all do a tremendous amount of work. I don't think you get enough credit for all the work that you do. And the ramifications of, the touches that you have with the engagements and the people. And so I want to express my appreciation for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't think of a better way to close out your workshop.
I'm not gonna let you off that easy.
Okay.
You know. So, echoing so much of what's been said here on both sides, well, it's really on one side. 10 years ago, this couldn't have happened, all right? Couldn't have had this conversation. And it wouldn't have been a conversation. It would have been staff feeding the board a bunch of stuff that we were supposed to rubber stamp, and most of the time we did. Am I right or wrong? Looking at the two other oldies but goodies sitting here. So I think that's important. And it could be, the only thing I would add to that is if rather than us sitting in the same room after a presentation, plenty of information, filling up our brains and then asking for the opinion, is maybe during the process of creating these reports, maybe check, not so much check in with, but run by some of us on the board, because there's a fair amount of talent amongst the seven of us, a lot of experience. I can't remember the last time I got a phone call, although we all get to talk to general manager on a regular basis. just running an idea of something that we're thinking about. And once you know a little bit more about our individual talents rather than our total talents, for instance, did you know there's somebody on the board that has a master's of public administration? Maybe that's valuable in the thought process. And of course, we know about the connections with the local governments and the like. So that would be the only thing I would recommend to take this a step further. That I think that it was pre-studied. And it would be nice to be pulsed every now and then and learning a little bit more about us as individuals. So we can help you, because this is what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to just listen to you and rubber stamp what you come up with. So there.
Director Maher.
I waited to laugh.
Want to say something that it isn't kind of in today, but last board meeting, I was impressed with, and it comes back to something that Lee was talking about. And HR is involved with, and everybody's involved with. I was getting concerned, at least you, like, we have all this institutional knowledge, we all come from different places, whatnot, and that works positive here. What I was worried about was, what's the next generation as we retire and do other things going to do? And that the board level is one issue, but the staff is what I had talked about in previous conversations with staff. Last board meetings level of presentations to us gave me hope for the future up to that 30 years. Because what I had seen, we were doing so much with so few for so long that I was concerned that we were going to hit this barrier, that there wouldn't be a good transition to the next generation, so we could all retire. So I was impressed with all you guys that came in, and it's like, there is hope for the future. People get it. They are going to be here. I am looking at the professionalism of people that I have seen at international business levels, talking about how to present things, how to do things. That's not to say that I don't love Justina's presentations every time. But the math of it isn't the exciting part. I talked about this in last year's retreat, that getting to the exciting parts is why people come out to our volunteers.
It's sexy.
Yeah, come on, I'm bracing it. So so that's what impressed me. I like I said, I worked internationally, I worked all over this country. And varies from single contributor to massive groups of people. And so I think I've seen what I wanted to see, which is that spark in the next generation of people that are working here. Don't drive us out too quick. I mean, we still won't be here. Really happy with that.
That's it. All right.
Onward.
All right. Unless there's any closing comments, I guess we will adjourn the meeting.
No pressure.